Try 44. Welcome to the gaze. Now, the word gaze basically means looking. Because the concept of the gaze can be approached from various different angles, it plays a big part in the theories of looking and spectatorship in modernity, providing us with some insight into the rise of urbanization through analyzing the historical, economical, and cultural contexts that relate to certain historical events. First of all, the medium, whether a picture is presented to us on a poster or a screen or a big billboard on the side of the road, it all has an influence in how we see those pictures and what those pictures do to us and what their meaning is to us. In order to understand the theories about the gaze, we need to explore how the concept of the human subject has evolved over time. One way of looking at it is presented to us by famous French philosopher René Descartes, who was a man of science. Descartes did not think that subjective tools such as sensory perception and empirical observations could provide rational answers. Our eyes, as we know, can easily play tricks on us and therefore, according to Descartes, are not a reliable source of information. So, in order to maintain objectivity, he liked to use scientific tools and mathematics. In his search for a fundamental scientific truth, he came to be responsible for the phrase, "I think, therefore I am," cogito ergo sum, which means that a conscious thought can only exist through the effort of a consciousness that needs to exist in order to make the thought exist, and etc. And in there lies the concept of the existing human subject as a conscious individual that thinks and acts. This concept is relevant within the context of contemporary visual culture, because it served as a rationale justifying the political dominance of modern liberal democracies. Because from this point on, modern philosophy began to see the human subject as an individual entity, with its own individual human rights, its own consciousness, and an autonomous source of action. The subject as an entity is guarded by our subconscious. We are not aware of the urges and desires that motivate us. This provides an entirely different view of the subject. Is the human subject self-knowing, or are we motivated by something else, like the urges and desires, or by the forces of labor and capital? The human subject being self-knowing and autonomous has been systematically questioned during the time of modernity. The philosopher Foucault, no, that's the other one, flipped the Freudian script from "we repress our innermost feelings so we don't act out" to "we have repressed feelings that will make us act out." So he felt they needed to be regulated rather than repressed. For Foucault, psychoanalysis is an institutional discourse through which the individual comes to recognize and understand itself. In order to gain some further insight into the concept of discourse, we must discuss Jacques Lacan, this dude, who shaped the idea of the human subject as not being a liberal individual, but rather a consciousness that emerges out of the identity split that emerges when we figure out that we are in fact an object in this world that can be seen by others. Lacan calls this the mirror phase, the phase where the emergence of the ego is kick-started by the infant individual looking into the mirror, thus seeing itself as an individual for the first time. And so Lacan ascribes the constitution of the human subject to the gaze. The terms gaze and spectatorship tend to be confusing because of their ambiguous nature. Visual studies use them as a set of terms and methods, as a tool to get a clear insight into viewing practices. Now, modernity is a term based on the concept of the human subject being this unique liberal snowflake. The term refers to the conditions surrounding the human subject that came with the rise of an industrial society and the idea of wielding those developments as a way of controlling nature. Due to the different pace at which nations have developed and their different notions of modern, we can't be certain when exactly modernity became a thing. For example, in Russia, modern expression rose through the communist ethos of equal benefits and living conditions, whereas in the United States, it is expressed in liberalism, capitalism, and economic prosperity. The term discourse is used to describe passages of writing and/or speech. Foucault used the term more specifically By discourse, he meant a group of statements that provide a means of talking about particular topics in a particular time. Foucault said there are three concepts that are useful for thinking about the relation of images and power. Panopticon, which is a fancy word for prison, power knowledge, and biopower. Now, the concept of panopticon is about how we participate in practices of self-regulation in response to systems of surveillance. Whether they are in place or assumed to be there, the sticker that says you're being watched, the camera doesn't have to be turned on or even in place for the inspecting gaze to exist. In modern societies, power relations are structured to produce citizens that actively participate in self-regulating behavior. This means that citizens willingly obey laws and adhere to dominant social values. Power relations create the criteria that counts as knowledge in a society. Many of the relationships of power in the modern political state are exercised indirectly on and through the body. This is what Foucault calls biopower. The society needs citizens that are willing to work, fight, and reproduce, and have a healthy, capable body to do so. Citizens who participate in the ideologies of the modern society desire to fit into the ideal image, the ideal body, and the ideal pose. The gaze, the spectator, and spectatorship signals that the concept of the individual is not a given. The meaning of the individual subject is not universal, but historically and culturally ever-changing.